So this is a brief video about the work that we're doing on our micro essay. So this video will be helpful to watch if you need more clarification, or if you're confused, or if you've been absent, or if you're coming in new. So it will help a lot of people. So I'm working in my week 6 digital notebook, and I am taking a look first of all at our task list on page 4. This is going to give you an overview of what we're doing this week and into next week, what we started last week. Again, just a reminder for those of you who are new, my arrow up here, you see the magnifier. If you click on 50, that will bring you in closer, and that's kind of where you want to hang out. So page 4, we're going to start with everything in this specific order. And this is important because I'm teaching you some new strategies in your writing. And it might seem slow at first, and you might just want to jump ahead and do all the writing immediately, but it's important that we take things step by step. We're writing this out of order. So we're writing it backwards. And this is how I like to think about writing, right? You want to start with first we start with our thesis statement. Right? We have to have the idea of what we're writing about. And so if you are a person who does not have a thesis statement, this slide is linked right here on page 4, slide 4 in your notebook. And it is linked right here. In fact, I am going to highlight it so that we pay attention to this slide. And if you click on it and zoom in, these are all the thesis statements that all of my classes came up with. So many different kinds, but you will notice that the words in red are universal ideas. Those are the big ideas. We have to have at least one, right, to write an essay to ensure that our essay is idea-based. And some of these have more than one. And you only need one. And what you're doing is you're comparing two texts. You're thinking about the gathering place. So I'm going to go back. So one thing here on this slide, you want to make sure you grab one of these thesis statements, copy it, Control C, you're going to highlight it, and then Control C, and then copy the one you want, and you're going to put it into page 8. Page 8 is where we're keeping all of our writing. You're just going to do Control V as in Victor, and you're going to drop that thesis statement in here. And if you would like to write your own, you may do that, but I do want you to email me your thesis statement before you get started if it's not one of these. If it's not one of these, I just want to make sure that it's what we need for you to write a really strong essay. So you always start with that thesis statement. And then what we're going to do immediately after the thesis statement, you are going to jump to find evidence. So here's how our essay is structured. It is called a micro essay, which means on a microbiology, right? On a very small detailed scale. And it's 2 paragraphs. Instead of an introduction, we're not going to do a whole introduction. We're just going to do a thesis statement. And in the same paragraph, we're going to talk about our first text. And our first text is Amanda Gorman, the poet, her poem called The Gathering Place. And see how I'm moving up and down on this left-hand bar? You can do that with your cursor. You want to go to page 17. So this is the first text. Okay, this is the first paragraph in our micro essay, all about this poem with the focus of the universal idea that you found, that you're comparing in your thesis. So for instance, if we take thesis statement 1, or A, royalty has the power to speak up, but is also powerless in the system. Whereas Amanda Gorman is empowered, strengthened by working hard to make the world better. So we know that this is all the first paragraph right here about Amanda Gorman in her poem, The Gathering Place. And we know that first paragraph is about finding evidence that shows she is empowered, she's strengthened by working hard to make the world better. So the evidence that we find on page 17 in our week 6 notebook about Amanda has to be she's empowered She's strengthened to make the world a better place. Okay, so we're looking for like 1 line, maybe 2 lines. We don't want to go more than 15 words because we want the bulk of our essay to be about what we think about her poem. We can go read her poem, right? You just need to find that slice of that piece, that chunk of the evidence that you feel best represents your thesis statement and the universal idea in the thesis statement. So hers is empowered or strengthened. So, you know, if you feel that it's this, right? Let's say it's this, you're going to do a Control C. We're going to highlight your evidence first. You're going to do a Control C, and then you're going to go back to your week 6 notebook, and you're going to drop it in to page 8 into this red, next to the red box for the evidence. So the evidence to show the universal idea that is attached to Amanda Gorman that you came up with, that evidence goes right here next to this red-ish box called quote 1, okay? And it says, quote, this is the quote about Amanda's poem, and you would put a quote in that. Okay, you do the same thing for royalty, all right? His poem. So here, if I'm choosing this thesis, you don't have to, but if I am, as an example, royalty has the power to speak up, but is also powerless. So you need to find a quote in your week 6 digital notebook on page 14, okay? This is his poem. You're finding a quote that shows, yes, he has power, but he's powerless in the system, which means he's been made to be powerless by a system, even though he has the power, right? A voice, an energy, an idea, and thought. So you're going to take 1 to 2 lines. You're going to highlight it. Okay, say this is it. Control C. You're going to go back up in your notebook to page 9. Page 9, the second paragraph is page 9. This is all about royalty. And you're going to put it right there. The spacing might be off, but you can get that. So let's say this is our quote. Okay. So now we have a quote for Amanda, the Gathering Place, which is page 8 in our notebook. That's going to be paragraph 1. And then we found a quote for royalty, for his poem, that is attached to the universal idea that we wrote about in our thesis for royalty. And that quote goes on page 9 next to this red box. His poem is Not Your Flag. Put his name in here. Okay. So now we should have our 2 quotes. So if you want to take a moment to pause this video to make sure that you have your thesis statement, and either you have gone up to page 4 and you have clicked on this highlighted slide to choose a thesis statement, or you come up with your own and email it to me for approval. And then you want to find your evidence. So please, when you pause, you want to make sure you have your thesis statement and now your evidence from each poem. Where do you find the poems? Everything is in this week 6 notebook that you need. Absolutely everything. They're at the back end of the notebook. If you are new and weren't, or if you were absent and you didn't listen to the poems, I think it's a great idea to always listen to it. And his is linked here on this picture. And it's 2 pages long. And hers is linked on page 17. On her picture is the YouTube. And this is 1 page. Okay, so take a moment, pause me, and make sure that you have your thesis and 2 pieces of evidence. 1 on page 8 for Amanda, 1 on page 9 for royalty. Okay, so we've just paused, and I know that everyone now has a thesis statement and 2 quotes, and if you don't, you will reach out to me. So if we go back up to page 4 for our task list for this essay, we want to find out what we have to do next. We've done thesis, we've done evidence. Now we're going to find out what a lead-in is. We have to write our lead-in. Okay, so let's go to our lead-in slide. That's in the notebook as well. It looks like this. It's page 6 in my notebook. You'd have to look to see what page it is in yours, but it looks like this. So lead-ins introduce the quote. Like if I had to give you one simple definition, they introduce the quote. It's like if you were bringing a friend home to dinner and your mom made this great meal, you're not just going to bring someone random person in and have that person sit and eat and not say a word. I mean, that would be really rude. So it's your job as the writer to introduce the quote for the reader, right? So it's clear in your head why you chose that quote. You have a reason. Like, don't assume that we know why you chose it. It's your responsibility as a writer to give us the context. So with, right, within the text. So con is the who and the what within the text. So you have to say, who is the speaker of this quote? What are they saying? Real general. What is this quote about? Really general. And when was it said? Like, what part of the text was it said? Right? So the best way to do this is, because we're working with a poem, is it at the beginning of the poem, the middle of the poem, the end of the poem? Okay? So let me show you what it looks like. There's 2 ways to write a lead-in statement that we're going to learn today. One is called comma plus signal verb. It's a little weird, but it's a formula, so we have to memorize it. What does it look like? So right here, she compares the effect of her name in English versus Spanish and declares. So this is from Esperanza's story that we read a couple weeks back. You don't need to know that, but it's from the house on Mango Street. And it's about the who, right? The what, she's comparing her name. They could have just said she compares her name between English and Spanish. But they went a little bit deeper, which is awesome, but you didn't have to do that. And then you see this and declares, okay? So that is, declares is like another word for says, right? This writer could have put says, but I really don't want to see says because we want to level up your language and your vocabulary. So instead of says, in no shows, right? Same thing for shows and same thing for states. I mean, like really level up your language. So this verb is declares, okay? Where did I get that from, right? This aqua blue box has all of our signal verbs that are strong. Not all, but a good fair amount that you can start with. So you can think in your head, says or states, but then replace it with a strong signal verb. And exclaims and remarks and charges and argues. And so those are like amping up. If you want to do one thing to have stronger writing, change your verbs and have stronger verbs. Like hands down, it's going to bump up your writing a couple levels. So the next way you can write a lead-in is to just put a colon at the end. So the colon is located 2 keys away from the left of your enter or return key. I always say it's like the fighting hands. And you have the same thing. What is she doing? She is doing this. She compares. What does she compare? Her name. Very, not deep, okay? Very general. And then the colon. And then a space. And then the quote. So let's just compare how this is different. Colon after a complete statement. Or you write and you think says, instead of saying and says, you would replace it with a strong signal verb. So this is and declares, comma, space, quote. So let's compare the 2 ways again. If you look to the right here, I have my formulas, right? Who and what, she compares her name, right? Plus a signal verb, which is a fancy word for says, comma, and then your quote. And the other way to do it is who and what she compares her name, colon, and then quote. This is new. It's very technical, right? This is a technical thing. And having things that are technical, that are done well, like this in your essay, will bump your essay up. Because then the reader, it will be very clear to the reader. And they're not going to have questions. And they can just flow right into your reasoning. All right. So because we have 2 quotes in this micro essay, one for Amanda's poem, one for Royalty's poem, I want you to write at least one of those quotes with a signal verb. Okay? Because I think that's a little harder and I want to push you. And then one of them can just be the statement with a colon. Please reach out to me when you're writing this because, again, it's new. This is new information, and I want you to feel like you have what you need to do this. Page 7 is a great place for you to go to begin thinking about how do I write a lead-in, right? Never done it before. This is a little confusing or a lot confusing. Go to page 7. Page 7 will take you from box to box to box to box where you want to go. You start with your evidence. You guys have that, right? Then you go to the pink box, number 2, who and what, your context. Well, who for Amanda Gorman is Gorman, and we always call a writer by their last name after we have introduced them for the first time. After we've already said their first and last name together, you would then call them by their last name. So Gorman talks about something, right? Whatever that quote represents, Gorman talks about. Or you could say, Gorman expresses her positive feelings about community. Then you do the colon, right? It's very general. We're not getting deep into how she feels about community. We're just saying Gorman expresses her positive feelings about community. So I might go up here. I'm going to go to page 8 where Amanda Gorman's lead-in is. It's the pink box. And I'm going to put who, Gorman. What does she do? You could just say talks about. That's a starting place. What does she talk about? Her feelings. Okay, her feelings about what? What community means to her. Great. If I want to level this up, I would say describe her feelings. Positive or negative? I always start there in description. Is it positive? Is it negative? Well, it's positive, so positive feelings. And then read it back to yourself to see if you have missed words. Gorman talks about her positive feelings about what community means to her. Great. That's a complete thought. That's a complete sentence. I can totally do a colon and then remind myself I'm then going to go into my quote. And your quote is down here, right? But in this box, it's just the lead-in. However, because I asked you to do a signal verb, right, for one of your quotes, Gorman, and you know what? I want to level up my writing. I don't want to use talks about, really, if I want to level up my writing. I want to find another strong verb. But let's say like I need to figure out where I can get my strong verbs, and I can get them here in my digital notebook, a list for strong verbs. So I'm going to get my strong verbs on page 6. I see the strong verb list. Okay, awesome. Click on it. This is the same list I give my AP language students. Again, bump up your verbs if you want strong writing. Choose one of these words. Instead of talks about, you can think talks about in your head. I do that when I write. Gorman talks about. What does she talk about from that quote? Give me the summary word. But instead, I want to bump up my writing. So I'm going to choose, it's a positive. We know Amanda's poem is positive. So I'm not going to do demonizes. I'm not going to do disparages. I'm not going to do ridicules. Those are all negative words. That could maybe be for Royalty's poem. because that has more of a negative attitude, right? About a negative like topic. Doesn't mean it's bad, but it has that negative tone to it. Whereas Amanda has that more positive, like loving tone, caring tone. So my verbs have to match. So if I want to go back to page 6, or page 8, sorry, and I'm writing, I might say Gorman expresses. That's neither positive nor negative. You can use that in both, for both poems, lead-ins. Gorman expresses her love for community. Great. Oh, guess what? I could put a colon. That's a complete thought, but I wanted you to get into a signal verb. So I'm going to do comma. I'm going to say and says, but I know that and says is not what I'm supposed to do. Where do I find my vivid verbs for my lead-ins? Go back to page 6, your lead-in page. I'm going to pull out one of these in the aqua blue box. I'm going to go into zoom into 50%. I've already used expresses in my lead-in statement. I don't know, it explains, agrees. She's not arguing. It's positive. Go back to my Amanda Gorman page, page 8, and do this with me. You know, write your lead-in with me now, or pause and take a moment to do it based on what I've been talking through. Gorman expresses her love for community and explains, comma, quote. So again, 2 ways to write a lead-in. One has the colon, one has the comma. One has a signal verb with the and that you're tacking onto the end of it. The point of the signal verb, it tells you a little bit more information about how she's communicating it. Here she's explaining it, and that's fine. That's an okay signal verb. Not the best I could have done, but okay. What if I says and emphasizes and recognizes and suggests and wishes and wonders? Those are all positive. For royalty, a signal verb would be on the negative side. Maybe he disagrees. He declares. It's stronger, right? It's this energy. He, what's another one? Warns. He warns. He asserts. He criticizes. He objects. Those are like, he contends, like a contender. So he's more of like the charge, with negative charge or strong feelings, and she's more like, oh, you know, community. So, okay. So if you want to pause to make sure that you kind of look over what I've done for the 2 lead-in statements, one with a colon, one with an and, strong signal verb, comma, and then quote, and make sure that you have one of these for Amanda's poem. So again, you can think in your head, she talks about, right? I encourage you to replace the talks about with a vivid verb. You find your vivid verb list on page 6, the lead-in page right here, strong verbs, Bitmoji. You replace the talks about with a strong vivid verb. You say the overall general, the what from the quote that you found. Here I wrote, she talks about her feelings about community, right? This one got a little bit more specific, leveled up the writing more by putting in, instead of talks about, this more vivid verb from the vivid verb list. Amanda expresses her love for community. So that's more information. Okay, so what you should have done by the end of Asynchronous Wednesday, and that I want to see on Thursday, your thesis statement, your lead-in, your quote for page 8 for Amanda Gorman, and then for page 9. And then I want you to read this page on topic sentences. That is where we're going next. So that will be my next video, is topic sentences and reasoning. And I will see you soon.